Hello, this is Chris. You're on Reality Shadow Band. Today we're going to be talking about military industrial complex, how what that was, how it has turned into something completely different than what it started out to be. And honestly, I mean, okay, I was a military brat. I grew up in the under military. Both my dad and stepdad were both Navy, retired 20 years. So I grew up on military bases and the Boy Scouts when it was actually pretty good and all that stuff. And so I appreciate the sacrifices that everyone has made and all the servicemen. I appreciate their service and a lot of them. Some people go in because they're down for the cause, and but most people today, at least, maybe back then, it was just economics. It was just a better than the situation they're in. If I was still raised by my dad working at that city job, no, my life would have been much different. So I appreciate all that. But given it in that context, I'm gonna fair use, by the way, Forgotten History channel. If you're not familiar with his stuff, he's based. He's a historian and as well as a Marine veteran, so he understands what the sacrifices that are involved, and he's also a historian and a professor, so he understands the fuckery as well. So let's go.
Today's episode is sponsored by Real Estate for Life. Started and fought to support the wealthy. Lieutenant General Smedley Butler's book, War is a Racket. He explained how wars were started and fought to support the wealthy industrialists who always profited from conflict by securing government contracts for everything from military weapons, hardware, uniforms, food, vehicles, aircraft.
Yeah, so if you aren't familiar with Smedley Butler's work, classic in this space, War is a Racket. He just shows how all this political stuff, freedom and religion and all this. No, that's just smokescreen for just world domination, control of resources, money, sex, power. It's just all the same stuff. It's not really what it says it is, which is extremely sad to me.
Conflict by securing government contracts for everything from military weapons, hardware, uniforms, food, vehicles, aircraft, guns, ammunition, and even chemicals. President Dwight D. Eisenhower also warned against the military-industrial complex. So let's get into it. What is the military-industrial complex? How have they shaped American foreign policy? Do they still have influence over foreign policy, and if so, what is that influence? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, military veteran, historian, author, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History.
He's also a Skeletor lookalike. No.
On January 7th,
So please go over to his channel, give him a like and subscribe. His stuff is awesome. It definitely gives you a different view on history that you may not have heard before if you've just been publicly schooled or publicly misschooled, publicly miseducated, or publicly indoctrinated like I was, and I didn't know anything about any of this stuff. I had to go look into it pretty hardcore, deeply. And for some reason, because I'm a little bit on the outside from being in a military family, moving around every 4 years, having to make new friends, and figuring out most people are pretty bad, actually. 80% at least and want to do you harm. Like a good 20% of that 80% want to do you harm. So it's like running into that over and over, and then being a little bit bookish and getting into my own rabbit holes. So yeah, let's go ahead and listen to President Eisenhower talk about the problem we're dealing with now.
On January 17th, 1961, Dwight D. Eisenhower concluded his presidential term by warning the nation about the increasing power of the military-industrial complex. He brought unparalleled experience to his speech, such as his life of service in uniform, as well as his tenure as the Supreme Allied Commander in the European theater during World War II. He warned against reducing the military and also stated that nuclear weapons were a solid deterrent to Soviet aggression. But he also warned, while we recognize the imperative need for this development, we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry, but American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well.
And this is one of the reasons why they supported Russia and financed the war. Wall Street financed the war of all this stuff because they knew that these wars are cash cows. They knew them before World War I. They just knew, but they didn't have a way to monetize it until they had the Federal Reserve, which allowed them to basically steal from the American people without them knowing anything about it. So that's really what that money, the fake money, is about: is to funnel, basically create wars, create mischief, or extract resources, whichever's gonna work. It's fine to create a class of untouchable people who believe that they are more than human
But we can no longer risk
and that we're their slaves.
the emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. He was referring to companies like General Motors and Ford Motor Company that rapidly shifted from production of cars and trucks into building military vehicles, including tanks, half-tracks, and even aircraft.
Yeah, I think people don't realize that they just switched from making cars to making planes and tanks. Yeah, and they figured out that by having lots of planes and tanks get crashed and destroyed and blown up and they can just make the taxpayer pay for it without them knowing that they're paying for it. This is the scam. This is one of the biggest scams on the planet, for sure. For sure, this is how they're using the Federal Reserve fake money to do all this stuff to keep us all enslaved and scared and panicking and killing each other for what?
These government contracts, as well as the money flowing in, allowing these companies to hire millions of previously unemployed Americans, hold the nation out of the Great Depression. As a result of recent world events,
right, the Great Depression that they caused on purpose to cause this to happen. I haven't heard him talk about all those pieces because that's really like, you get into some dark territory there. You may be careful. I don't want to be called a conspiracy theorist or anything like that. You don't want that label on you, do you? Because that means you're a bad person.
especially World
If you're connecting any dots, you're definitely a bad person.
War II, nearly every American industry answered the call and successfully converted their domestic product production into a wartime industrial giant line unlike any other. After World War II, just like World War I, the United States drastically reduced its military personnel as a way to save money. But that changed after the Korean War as the threat of communist aggression became far more relevant.
Yeah, that all spun up by this same group Smedley talked about.
If you are moving to a warmer state or just a family in the U.S., also
Skip the commercial.
Eisenhower witnessed
You can go to his channel and watch the commercial.
the creation of a permanent massive armaments industry, something which had never been seen before in world history. Eisenhower also cautioned against the federal government becoming too deeply involved with military and industrial leaders. He was also concerned about the massive spending that would occur in an open arms race against the Soviet Union, which would
Yeah, that they financed, by the way. So don't get it all twisted, y'all. This is all U.S. taxpayer money.
drain away financial resources from other critical domestic projects, such as his Eisenhower Interstate System, which was the national highway system we see today, as well as schools, hospitals, and infrastructure maintenance. He saw the collaboration as necessary for national defense, but on a limited scale, and that the American people needed to be aware and wary of any such unions. One of his greatest concerns
So Orwell, in his book 1984, splits the world up in three pieces. This is what he was talking. This is what he was talking about. This is the implementation. I know it's hard to like, you know, see it, but it's like Brave New World, 1984. Those two things together is the world we are living in.
concerns was the rise of the military corporations, defense contractors, and others with a nose in the trough. He saw the birth of massive armies of lobbyists representing these companies, contributing to members of Congress, primarily senators and representatives, to get their foot in the door to have bills put forth for votes to secure highly lucrative contracts and have them approved for their respective firms. Today, there are far fewer technology-producing corporations than there were decades ago, since companies like Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, General Electric, and Northrop Grumman are well established deep inside the halls of political power.
Yeah, this is not going to change. This is not reversing. It's only going to double down. And the thing is, they've gone fifth generation warfare with this. So now they're using the mind control techniques they developed in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. They deployed it in the 90s. They've gone through at least 3 cycles of the mind control operations that they've done on other countries here in the United States. So they are now doing it direct. They're doing the direct warfare. So anyone that opposes them is going to get a swarm of weaponized AI drones that cannot be stopped. If you say EMP in the comment section, I will ban you. You can still watch the videos, but you can't comment on my stuff anymore.
Due to having their respective branches and companies scattered throughout the nation in many states, they have excelled at both lobbying politicians who represent those states, stating the jobs they provided can provide and increase the state GDPs as well as bring in taxes. They also have excellent marketing teams to advertise and promote their respective interests and products. All of
Really good salespeople, guys.
these companies
The best. They have the best salespeople. Give them the old razzle dazzle. Give them the old, your enemy is gonna destroy you from over the poles. You need our weapons defense system. You're right, we do. Let's make the taxpayer pay for it. He won't even know. He won't even notice it.
do provide a service to the national defense, but some smaller firms do not really provide anything on a regular basis. Their money is made where they must supply materiel to increase production during conflict. A few are subsidiary companies that provide components for aircraft, rockets, and missiles, nuts, bolts, etc. Their livelihood depends upon congressional appropriations and spending as well, and this is where the lobbyists come into play.
Yeah, lobbyists, by the way. Okay, the fact that we have a lobbyist as a thing, it's a legalized bribery, and it's all paid for by tax dollars, and they don't pay for it. These companies don't pay for their own bribes. That's far too uncouth. The taxpayer will pay those bribes, sir. Do not worry about that.
As a result of all of this, Eisenhower tried to cut the Pentagon's budget while maintaining a prominent deterrence force, but not spending massive amounts of money to increase the military at the expense of other programs. Eisenhower also said, "The jet plane that roars overhead cost $750,000. That's more than a man will make in his lifetime. What world can afford this kind of thing for long?"
Not this one.
Former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates echoed Eisenhower, a fellow Kansan. "Does the number of warships we have and are building really put America at risk when the U.S. battle fleet is larger than the next 13 navies combined, 11 of which are our partners and allies?"
Okay. U.S. military, Navy, larger than the next 13 navies combined, and those 11 of those navies are our allies? Come on now. That is a major boondoggle, and nobody gives a fuck because it's all the U.S. military. Yeah, so I just want to stop it there. If you want to watch the rest of it, please go do. Give his channel a like and subscribe. I'll put it in the show notes. And this is Reality Shadow Band. This is episode 9 about the military industrial complex.